Hi, I'm Lawrence Gett and would like you to join me on a tour, and casually we will explore country New South Wales, from the Upper Hunter to the higher elevation along the Great Dividing Range of New South Wales. Along Highway 15, which is part of Australia's national system, that forms the inland route between Sydney and Brisbane. We will briefly visit some of the old towns and cities' historical churches. Historical old buildings and some fascinating and colourful creations of our natural world. Travelling along the New England Highway 15, we are approaching the town of Scone in the Upper Hunter. We stop briefly to visit our first sacred place of St. Luke's Anglican Church, erected in 1884. Typical Gothic Revival architecture, with pointed window arches and sharply pointed bell tower. Still in the Upper Hunter region, we enter the historic town of Murrurundi, established in the 1840. Population of 847. Many of its old buildings are of historical significance and are heritage listed. Murrurundi train station is a typical Victorian architecture and opened in 1872. It is still operating to this day. St. Joseph Catholic Church was established in 1860. The church's bell is located separately away to the side of the church in a tall tower. Behind the church is the town cemetery, where the town founder Peter Hayden is buried, who died in 1842. Unfortunately, vandals has entered the peaceful cemetery, and gravestones were pulled down and heavily smashed. Beautifully carved stone, the anchor symbolizes hope and steadfast. Grapes symbolize the blood of Christ, and shedding of his blood for all mankind. New South Wales Trainlink pulls up at Willow Tree Station after a 6-hour trip from Sydney Central. It will complete its 8-hour trip when it reaches Armadale Station. St. Oswald's Anglican Church of Willow Tree, built in 1924. Note the small tower to the side of the church that houses a small bell. The Northern Garage, withstanding the test of time, now an antique shop. The small town of Wallabada, population 746, is located in the New England region, on the Liverpool Shire. The Catholic Church of St. Ian, a Gothic architecture style, built in 1910, adjacent to the New England Highway. As we are heading towards the city of Tamworth, I could not resist to capture this straw-necked ibis and a group of chaps being bullied by a magpie. Tamworth has a population of 43,000 and it was established in 1850. Tamworth is recognized as the horse capital of Australia. Many Australian equine events take place in Tamworth. The town is also famous as the country music of Australia. St. Nicholas Catholic Church is of a Gothic Revival design built in 1877, replacing the St. Nicholas Older Church built in 1859. Former St Andrew's Church, built in 1866, and it has been converted into a cafe gift shop. It is of a Federation architecture and design. Tamworth Railway Station is a country link of the New South Wales train link system. It opened in 1882, a magnificent Victorian architecture and design, like many other regional train stations of that era. New South Wales train link on its 8-hour trip to Sydney Central. Tamworth City Uniting, formerly Wesley Methodist Church, opened in 1872. The magnificent church organ was built in 1923-24 by Walter George Randall of Sydney. Another famous place of worship in Tamworth is the St Paul's Church, built between 1951 and 1958. Much of the church building was done with volunteer labour by the parishioners. Travelling along the New England Highway, we reach the town of Uralla, established in 1855, with a population of 2,300. Some classical Victorian and Federation architecture buildings, late 1800, early 19. The former St Joseph Catholic Church was built in 1881. It is no longer used for worship and is now a part building of St Joseph's School. Uralla Cemetery is the resting place of the notorious bushranger Fred Ward, or Captain Thunderbolt as he was known. He was an outlaw and wanted for horse and cattle stealing. He was also wanted for robbing the Royal Mail and some hotels. He evaded the law for many years, but eventually the law caught up with him and he was shot and killed by a police constable in 1870. A fascinating and rare gravestone carving of the 19th century country Australia, dating back as early 1860. We are now heading north to the city of Armidale, established in 1849. Population 24,500. It is the administrative centre for the Northern Tablelands, and halfway between Sydney and Brisbane. It is a busy and thriving country city. It has some of the finest schools, including the famous University of New England. The city of Armidale has some magnificent architecture with Gothic cathedrals, classical and Victorian-style buildings. The Victorian design of Armidale Post Office and the classical revival of the former courthouse dating back to 1860, both designed by architect James Barnett. The Tattersall's Hotel of an Art Deco architecture built in 1856. The Imperial Hotel is a brick and stucco Victorian architecture and design, built in 1889. St Paul's Presbyterian Church, a Gothic revival design, with a tall steeple and with a rose window, built in 1882. St Mary and Joseph Catholic Cathedral was built in 1811 in the Federation Gothic revival style. It is truly a magnificent place of worship and fine architecture. A must visit if you are ever visiting the city of Armidale. Armidale train station is a classical example of the finest Victorian architecture style. It is well preserved and still at work since it opened in 1883, with daily 8-hour trips to Sydney Central. We will now soon exit the New England Highway, and we will visit one of my favourite villages in the New England district of Black Mountain. Black Mountain is a village with a population of 310, located on a volcanic uplift of the Northern Tablelands. It was a favourite holding place for the notorious Captain Thunderbolt, the bushranger and outlaw, during the 1860s. The small village Baptist church, built in 1902. I feel a great sense of peace and tranquility as I explore this small sleepy village. It seems and feels time stood still, living in the 1800s. We only need momentarily to stop for brief moments and explore our environment, and we will be amazed and memorized with the beauty that surrounds us. Colorful birds, delicate flowers, grasses, and extraordinary insects. Things we take for granted. The well-camouflaged butterfly, the common brown. The pupae of the emperor moth, encased in a silky cocoon. The sawfly larvae. They believe they are safer in numbers. And the tiger moth, with wings like velvet. Very close by was the village small cemetery, closely hidden under cover by tall trees and other vegetation. The gravestones and monuments are of Victorian architecture and are found scattered across a wide area amongst tall grasses. Not a sound or a whisper. Occasionally, the chirping and whistling of birds inside the forest around the cemetery can be heard. A place of solitude and peace of mind. The Black Mountain train station was built in 1884 and closed in 1987. It is now a ghostly station and a museum. Weeds and grasses hugging the 100-year-old tracks, where they fell quiet for the last 34 years. A total distance of 613 kilometers from this point to Sydney Central. The base of a giant fir tree, more than 100 years old, and at least 30 meters in height. It's a conifer, meaning bearing cones with needle-like leaves. The next town to visit is Guyra. Guyra was established in 1885 with a population of 1,983. The country town produced some of the finest lamb and beef. I stopped and camped for the first night at the edge of an extinct volcano, an overnight park known as the Mother of Ducks Lagoon. The first stone of St. James Anglican Church was laid in November 1914. Gothic architecture and design, and having a small bell at the side of the church. Not too far is the St. Mary's of the Angels Catholic Church, with the first stone laid down in March 1908. Another impressive Gothic Revival church building. The small bell of the St. Mary's of the Angels Catholic Church. Another Gothic Revival building is the St. Columba's Presbyterian Church, built in 1928. A good-looking small church with a large arch window and a cone-shaped bell tower. Guyra train station became a museum since the Great Northern Main Line was abandoned in 1999. The familiar sounds on approaching steaming locomotive is all but vanished forever. Abandoned and ghostly train stations is all that remains. The end of an era, and a sweet nostalgia and unforgettable memories. I decided to stop and explore a bushland dirt track, and as I walked amongst tall grass, I was surrounded by tall grey gum trees, many with dark rough bark, while others shedding thin strips of bark. A sea of native yellow pepper daisies amongst soft and delicate tall grasses, gently swinging side to side with the gentle breeze. I can only describe this natural environment as silent, isolated and peaceful. A delicate and graceful bluebell flower. I am so glad I stopped. My short hike was somewhat magical and very rewarding. I can only say I had a great and wonderful day, as it nears near its end. We are back on the road, heading to the small town of Ben Lomond. Sheep and goats feeding peacefully on fresh green grasses and amongst tall daisies. The summer flowers slowly withering as autumn season creeps in, bringing cooler weather. I was informed by a local villager of a little church on the hill. I came to an area heavily covered with tall shaded trees, and as I entered and walked a dark shaded area, a building of a small but beautiful church suddenly appeared from nowhere. So quiet and peaceful, not a sound. I felt like I'm intruding on this holy ground. It is St. Paul's Anglican Church, and first stone was laid in January 1926. The church is of a Gothic style and have a fascinating bell tower with a roof the shape of a pyramid. Ben Lomond was established during the early 1860s and it has a population of 152. Not too far down the road is Ben Lomond St. Patrick's Catholic Church, first stone laid in March 1928. A Romanesque architecture to be incorporated in new churches in Australia. There is a small local cemetery dating back as 1891. A memorial for the soldiers of Ben Lomond who sacrificed their life during the First and Second World War. Back on the road, heading towards the town of England Nsw. Town on the northern tablelands with a population of 6,055 and established in 1852. It is quite a large town with some outstanding heritage buildings. The famous and fabulous England Nsw Chapel Theatre is originally a Methodist church built in 1885 and later in 1983 was converted into a theatre and proudly claims to be the longest continuous running arts council in Australia. The St. Patrick's Catholic Church, first stone laid in 1864. A Gothic style architecture with colourful and ornate stained glass windows. The roof of the bell tower is slated with an ornamental flash, with a tall buttress spire and a wrought iron cross at the very top. An awesome breathtaking scenery of the Great Eastern Mountain Range. As I reached at the end of the day, I pulled up for a night's rest at Biddy's Waters Camp, a few kilometers north of England Nsw. After a good night's sleep, we're back on the road as we enter the village of Deepwater. It has a population of not much more than 300. Some dark events in 1844 has been recorded for Deepwater, when some shepherds were killed by the Ngangarabu Aborigines. As a retaliation, some Aboriginal men, women and children were killed. A disappearing act by the common brown butterfly. White and golden paper daisies swaying gently with the breeze. Our journey continues taking us closer to Queensland's southern border. New construction of the New England Highway upgrade is well underway at Bolivia Hill between England Nsw and Tenterfield. This will improve road safety for transport efficiency and travelling. The new road is being built on high concrete piers to minimize impact on the natural environment. Tenterfield is a regional town in New South Wales with a population of 4,066 and was established in 1851. It is also the hometown of the much loved and celebrated Broadway cabaret singer, dancer and pianist Peter Allen, and famous for his patriotic song I Call Australia Home and Tenterfield Settler. He was one of the finest cabaret pianists in the world. He died in 1992, California, USA, age 48. A beautiful and typical classical Italianate architecture building of the 1870s and 1890s. Like many other of the cinema theatres of our past, were closed down and turned to convenience shops. The old St. Mary's Catholic Church is the oldest diocese in Armidale, built in September 1866. On the same grounds is the newer Catholic Church, Our Lady of Perpetual, first stone laid in 1939. A Romanesque in design that is being incorporated in Australia church building. Tenterfield Creek, or Sunnyside Railway Bridge, is the last railway bridge of the Great Main Northern Line south of Queensland border. The bridge was built in 1888, more than 130 years old. It's the bridge that links Sydney to Brisbane, a significant achievement of rail history and a stretch of heritage track in the country. There is many stories to tell about these bridges, and we must preserve them at all costs. It is imperative to preserve this unique engineering icon for those generations who lived during those good old days, and for future generations to come. We now cross through the small town of Jennings, New South Wales, and at the same time entered Queensland across the border in the town of Wollongara. Jennings have a population of 211 and Wollongara 468. Jennings to the left and Wollongara to the right. A break of gauge was established during 1877 on the New South Wales Jennings platforms and the Queensland Wollongara train station. The town of Jennings was the home of a large advanced ammunition dump during World War II. The change of platforms between the New South Wales white tracks to the Queensland narrower ones made it possible to load ammunition and much needed goods and military troops, fast and efficiently. Wollongara train station stopped all operations in 1984. The railway tracks still run on required basis. Now it's under the care of the Australian Railway Historical Society. Please subscribe so you can be updated on my next project. Thank you for watching.